What if the most infamous betrayal in the Bible was not born from greed, but was the final move in a war planned long before it happened? We know her as the woman who took down God's strongest man. But what if Delilah was more than a seductress? What if she was a carefully chosen weapon, the last piece in a strategy designed to strip Israel of its champion? To uncover her truth, we have to look beyond the familiar verses in Judges and step into the dangerous borderlands where politics, faith, and ancient rivalries collided. Delilah's name appears only briefly in Scripture, yet her shadow stretches for centuries. The book of Judges places her in the valley of Sorek, a region between Israel and Philistia, a fault line where every alliance was suspect. This was no random romance. Samson, Israel's judge and God's chosen deliverer, had already clashed with the Philistines, humiliating them again and again. For them, brute force had failed. To bring him down, they needed a weapon that could reach his heart. The Bible never directly calls Delilah a Philistine, but most assume she was. Some Jewish traditions describe her as a Philistine spy, others as a priestess of Dagon, their grain and fertility god. Whether foreign or local, her loyalties were not with Israel. Even her name, possibly from the Hebrew Delilah, to weaken reads like an omen of what was to come. The Philistine rulers offered her an enormous sum, 1,100 pieces of silver from each lord, in exchange for the secret of Samson's strength. This was more than payment, it was a declaration. They believed she could succeed where armies failed, not because of beauty alone, but because she could get close enough to find the one thing no warrior could take from him. The story unfolds with a chilling pattern. She asks for his secret. He lies. She tests him, calling in the Philistines. He escapes, and yet he stays. 3 times this happens, each one a warning he ignores. Was it arrogance, blindness, or something darker? A pull he couldn't resist. Some suggest Samson, knowing his divine calling was nearly over, walked willingly toward his own downfall. Others believe Delilah's influence was almost spiritual, a binding that worked as surely as ropes or chains. On the 4th attempt, Samson reveals everything: the Nazirite vow, the uncut hair, the covenant with God. Whether she understood the full weight of this is unknown, but she acted with precision. She lulled him to sleep, called for a man to shave his 7 locks, and the strength that had defied armies was gone. In that moment, she didn't just betray a man, she set a link between Israel and their God's promise. The Valley of Sorek became more than a place. It became a symbol, the meeting point of divine purpose and human betrayal. Delilah stepped out of the role of a mere lover and into that of an archetype, the betrayer of strength, the hand that delivers the chosen into the grip of their enemies. But her motives remained the great unanswered question. Was it greed, duty to her people, or was she playing her part in an ancient, unseen struggle? The answers lie hidden in the intersection of history, scripture, and legend, and if we follow them, we might find that Delilah's betrayal was only the beginning of a much larger story. What if Samson's downfall was not simply the result of one woman's betrayal, but the final chapter of a war between gods? We think of Samson as a man brought low by his own weakness, but what if his story is part of something older? A struggle between the God of Israel and the deities of the surrounding nations. To uncover the deeper truth, we must see Delilah not only as a person, but as a symbol, the human face of a spiritual conflict that had been raging long before she ever met him. By the time Delilah entered Samson's life, his reputation had become legend. He had humiliated the Philistines repeatedly, burning their fields, toppling their gates, slaughtering their soldiers. But every act of defiance carried a spiritual meaning. Samson was a Nazirite from birth, set apart for God's service. His uncut hair was not magic, but a living sign of a covenant, a declaration that his strength came from the God of Israel alone. For the Philistines, defeating him was not just a military victory, It was an assault on the very faith of their enemy in the ancient Near East. Wars were as much about the gods as the people. When nations fought, it was believed their deities fought alongside them. Victory meant your god was stronger. Defeat meant your god had abandoned you. The Philistine god Dagon was often depicted as a god of grain, fertility, and, in some interpretations, the sea. But his worship also carried darker, more violent undertones. The removal of Samson's strength, therefore, would not simply be a personal humiliation. It would be seen as Dagon overpowering the God of Israel. Delilah's role in this is what makes her so dangerous. Whether she acted purely for silver or out of devotion to her people's cause, her betrayal was a perfect convergence of human and spiritual warfare. The method was as important as the result. She didn't lure Samson into a battlefield ambush. She defeated him in the quiet, intimate space of trust, in the place where his guard was supposed to be strongest. The slow erosion of Samson's defenses is perhaps the most haunting part of the story. He was no fool. He recognized danger before. He had faced Philistine trickery many times and survived. Yet with Delilah, he lingered. Each false answer he gave her was like a test of her persistence, and each time she failed, she returned, undeterred. It was a battle of endurance, and Samson, for all his physical might, underestimated the strength of her resolve. Some scholars believe Delilah's repeated attempts mirror ancient seduction and betrayal narratives found in surrounding cultures, stories where heroes are undone, not by superior force, but by the slow drip of temptation and deceit. In these tales, the betrayer often represents not just an individual, but an entire worldview opposed to the heroes. Delilah, in this reading, becomes the embodiment of Philistia's resistance to Israel's God, the living agent of a rival deity's plan. When Samson finally revealed his secret, it was not in a moment of drunken carelessness or sudden trust. The text suggests it came after constant nagging, to the point where his soul was vexed to death. This is more than mere irritation, it's psychological warfare. Breaking his spirit was the necessary first step to breaking his body, and once his hair was gone, the Philistines wasted no time. They seized him, gouged out his eyes, and bound him in bronze chains, symbols of complete subjugation. The loss of sight is particularly significant. In biblical symbolism, vision is tied to understanding, prophecy, and spiritual clarity. Samson's blindness represents not just physical captivity, but the stripping away of his divine calling. In that moment, the Philistines believed they had won not just over a man, but over the God who had empowered him, and Delilah. Her part in this victory would have been celebrated as the cunning stroke that succeeded where all else failed. Yet here's the strange twist. Delilah vanishes from the narrative after Samson's capture. The Bible never tells us what happened. To her, no punishment, no reward, no death, no escape. It's as if, once her role was complete, she faded into the shadows, mission accomplished. This absence has fueled centuries of speculation. Did she live out her days in wealth, surrounded by honor from her people? Or did she vanish because she had served something or someone that demanded her silence afterward? This is where the mystery deepens. In the ancient world, disappearances like this in a text often hint at untold stories, events the writer chose not to reveal, either because they were too dangerous, too scandalous, or too sacred to speak openly. Delilah may have been more than just a pawn. She may have been an active agent in a ritualized act of spiritual conquest, one that could not be fully described to the audience of the time. To truly grasp the weight of this, we must step back and look at Samson's fall, not as an isolated event, but as part of a recurring pattern in Scripture. The chosen one brought down by betrayal from within, from Eve's conversation with the serpent, to David and Bathsheba, to Judas and Jesus. The most devastating blows often come from those allowed inside the circle of trust. Delilah is part of this lineage, her betrayal echoing through history as both a warning and a reminder that strength is never just about physical power. And yet, her disappearance from the record is almost more powerful than her presence. It leaves a vacuum, an open space into which myths, legends, and suspicions pour. Was she rewarded by her gods? Did she pay a hidden price for what she had done? Or was she simply the mortal face of a deeper darkness, one that would resurface in other forms, in other times, wearing other names? What if Delilah's betrayal was not the end, but the beginning of a deeper, hidden narrative that reshaped destiny? Most stories end with Samson's capture, but what if the true significance of Delilah's act lies beyond his fall, in the spiritual and mythological ripples that followed? To grasp her lasting impact, we must explore how her betrayal fits into ancient symbolism, apocryphal legends, and enduring cultural echoes. Delilah's role transcends mere treachery. She symbolizes the disruption of divine order. Her act severed the covenant between Samson and God, but it also represented the fragile balance between human free will and divine will in many ways. Delilah's betrayal echoes the archetypal motif of the femme fatale, a woman whose power lies in her ability to undermine men and kings. Shifting the course of history through intimate influence, ancient Near Eastern myths abound with similar figures. Goddesses and priestesses wielded spiritual authority that could both create and destroy. Some scholars link Delilah to such figures, suggesting she was more than a historical person, a living symbol of the tension between competing religious and cultural forces. Apocryphal writings and later traditions deepen this mystery. In some Jewish legends, Delilah is portrayed as a Philistine priestess dedicated to Dagon, the god who represented chaos and fertility, forces often in conflict with Israel's God. Her disappearance from the biblical narrative fuels speculation that she entered secret rites or paid a hidden price for her actions. Delilah's story also resonates through literature and art, where she becomes the quintessential betrayer, a symbol of dangerous female power. From medieval morality plays to modern novels and films, her image is invoked to explore themes of trust, temptation, and downfall. But beneath the surface, her betrayal also raises profound theological questions. Was her act purely evil, or part of a divine plan that required human complicity? Samson's eventual redemption, his final act of strength, bringing down the Philistine temple, suggests that even betrayal can serve a higher purpose. In this light, Delilah's role is ambiguous. She is villain and instrument, temptress and warrior, betrayer and catalyst. Her story challenges us to reconsider the nature of strength, the price of faith, and the complexity of human motives in the unfolding of sacred history. As we close this chapter, one thing is clear. Delilah's legacy is not just in Samson's fall, but in the ongoing tension between power and vulnerability, light and darkness, trust and betrayal, a tension that continues to shape our understanding of faith and human nature.